Hey guys, it's Ollie from Rad Season. Welcome to another episode of the Rad Season Show. I'm super excited to be joined today by former professional snowboarder and entrepreneur, Keir Dillon. Keir, how are you, man?
I'm doing great, Ali. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on. Whereabouts are you?
I'm down in sunny San Diego, in California, hanging out.
Nice, man. And how's everything over there?
It's good. I mean, I think it's with everything with COVID and everything, it down in San Diego, it's feeling kind of normal. If I go up and see up in the North County, kind of like 30 minutes north of me, it's like kind of like it never happened. So it's definitely I don't know. I think the vibe of everything is loosening and people are excited.
Yeah, nice, man. And have you been getting out?
Yeah. I mean, I was kind of getting out mostly through it.
Yeah,
in a respectable way, but yeah, just keeping it. Trying to get out there, trying to get back golfing and surfing and active and snowboarding. And yeah, it's I think after a long time off and then kind of COVID, it's nice to like really get back to the roots of what got us all into this.
yeah, man. And you went snowboarding fairly recently after a bit of a long break, right?
Yeah, it had been almost 8 years. I did one day in Colorado at Copper, which was pretty cool. I went out there for Black History Month, filming a new shred, and then went to a World Quarterpipe Championship up in Squaw Valley that Slush Magazine put on, and it was so rad. It was like many generations of shredders, like Chris Roach and just like Russell Winfield and just like all the new shreds, and it was fun. It was just like a perfect, like, this is why I love snowboarding. This is why I love the people of snowboarding. I'm just so grateful for it. So it was, yeah, that, and then went to Mammoth, and I mean, I kind of felt like a shredder again. It was good.
Nice, man. It must have been good being back, right? And catching up with everybody. And
I think like anything in life, you step away from it because you're in it so intensely, right? And you get caught up in just such, like, I won't say the business of it, but just like the stuff that really you don't get into it for. And then to be able to come back and just kind of be like, oh yeah, like such good humans and being one with nature and just, having ADD and, kind of a crazy upbringing. Snowboarding was always like the release for me, right? It's like that magical thing that you could go do and forget about anything in the world and just be present in growth and just like, I don't know, like you forget the magic of it sometimes.
yeah.
How about you? Nice. You been out?
Yeah, I've been like surfing quite a bit and doing like a lot of biking. So I kind of like took out I suck. I'm complete beginner, but like took out the mountain bike, and that kind of almost like saved me in lockdown, just to sort of like mentally kind of getting through it and just getting out, just getting out in nature and kind of getting away from it all.
Right on. Any courses, or like, do you guys like, what's the setup over there?
Yeah, so we've got like, so I'm just outside Lisbon, and they've got like a pretty decent like mountain range like around here. And yeah, I kind of moved here for the surf, and then just sort of discovered like all these biking trails, and it's almost like as good as the waves over here. And like, yeah. I'm blown away. I couldn't believe it. So like, yeah, with the setup's pretty good. You can bike and surf in the same day, and yeah,
kind of like Cali living.
Pretty good. That's it, man.
European Cali living.
Yep, sort of. Good. Well, I'd love to take it back to the beginning, if that's all right, and kind of growing up in Pennsylvania and where it all sort of started for you.
Yeah. I grew up in East Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania, kind of like an hour and a half west of New York City, small little town. And it's crazy now, like, we're 40 plus, so we're getting old enough now when you look back and you're just like, I mean, it was single mom, pretty much, 3 brothers, all crazy, and really no rules. Now that I think about it, right? Like, it was just like back then it feels like you could kind of do anything because there's nothing really to get in trouble with, right? So it's just like this aspect of living in a place that's super boring. My older brother was into skiing and skateboarding, so I fell in love with that. And then I mean, I think my parents or my mom was always just like, if I can keep you busy, I can maybe keep you out of trouble. So that just kind of led to snowboarding, and snowboarding just became that vehicle to just, I guess, embrace being different, embrace kind of maybe not conforming, right? This is like back when, I mean, traditional sports were kind of the sports. Yeah. So it was, it was a pretty magical outlet that we could all like unify around this idea of like snowboarding and just dreaming about what it could be and just I mean, back then it was nothing, right? It was like, I always say it's kind of the equivalent of if you were to say, I'm going to go be like a pro pogo sticker, right? Like although today that might be easier. So it was pretty cool.
And would you say like, was it skateboarding that kind of kicked that all off?
I mean, we had like mini ramps. We had a vert ramp in my backyard. So it was definitely skateboarding, but I think I always just sucked at skateboarding. So it was just like I tried to do it because my older brother did it and I wanted to be cool, but it was really, I think, skiing and being on the mountain that really started to kind of like infuse the culture of like after school night riding, showing up with your friends, like having this thing to be competitive at, but also like sharing the joy of it together and talking trash. And so it was more I think skiing kind of led more into really my love for snowboarding.
And were you sort of like following your older brothers into that, or did they like kind of get into skiing first and then you kind of sort of tagged along with them? Or
yeah, I mean, I had two older brothers, and the one was, he's a musician, he was a skater, and like I think any kid just wants to be like their older brother, right? I think my nickname was even like Little Jai because my brother's name's Jai. So it was just trying to keep up, and it kind of led to that. And I got into then BMX, so it's kind of like snowboarding in the summer and then BMX riding. Like we'd go to nationals and race and stuff. So it was, I don't know, it's like anything in life. I think that the people you link up with really have a massive influence on, your trajectory in life and what you care about and what you get into, right? And I was just lucky that the older kids didn't have a ton of people to go snowboarding with. So they kind of were stuck with these like little groms that we go up to Vermont and stuff. So.
Was there a crew of you like in your high school growing up that were kind of into the same thing, or?
Yeah, no, it was, and looking back, there's probably like, I don't know, maybe like 5 of us to 10 of us. We had like SHC, like Shawnee Hardcore. So we were like, in graphic arts, making like the stickers, and it was like back when stickers, it didn't even have like the water coating. So you're all excited, and then you took it up to the mountain. Like the first night, it just ripped off. So it's crazy to think back just to how like primitive so many aspects of life were, including the sport, right? But it was also like the most magical times. I mean, just watching even, YouTube fed me some like ISF World Cups from like '94, I think. And it's just like watching where the sport was.
Yeah. And when did how old were you when you switched? Like, were you sort of competing? Like, were you doing skiing like races and stuff before?
Yeah. Peter Bauer, old pro, him and Jean Nerva had pro model race boards. He popped up on Instagram the other night, and I was like, oh my gosh! Like I used to, when I first started, it was skiing and snowboarding, and then it was like they had mogul contests. We would train GS and slalom. Like I remember like setting up the gates and it was cool just to kind of like give them like props, because it was, I mean, back then it was racing and freestyle, right? It was
one thing. Right?
That was kind of it, right? I mean, you see all the old photos, and it's like racing was just as influential as freestyle. So it's just, I mean, lots of things had changed. But I mean, in the beginning too, you could show up on Thursday nights, and that was like when you could go snowboarding. Like that was it, right? Like,
wow.
Not like, and that's just, that's for 1 year, and then they slowly opened it. But it was cool to be, I guess, a part of the culture that was really kind of changing norms, right? And when you're in it, you don't really see it that way. But looking back and just hanging with other people that were kind of in the industry as well, whether it's on like the music or fashion side, has been really cool just to see kind of like that bubble and how we all kind of attached to that and that culture of it.
Yeah. And when I guess like sponsorship and sort of like that side of things, when did that begin? I was 15, the Burton rep had come to my local mountain, and we're still friends to this day. He's had a massive influence on my life, this guy, Michael Hofer. And he's like, and I was like, yeah, you're going to sponsor me next year. Like super cocky kid, like and he's like, oh yeah. And it ended up, he ended up giving me a board. And that year I met up with Jeff Curtis and did a photo shoot with like Blair and Shane and, kind of the it kids coming up from from the East Coast on Burton. Had a good session there, got like a Burton ad, and it was, like looking back now, it's like one of those things where just like, you're just so in it, right? And like opportunities are coming and you're kind of like manifesting it, although manifesting wasn't like a term back then, you just kind of believed. And
Yeah, it's now looking back, even for today, right? Like of like trying to do new things and just trying to like anchor into that core passion and belief and just kind of like that childlike curiosity to like not have to have everything figured out and just kind of like go, right? And I think when I look back on that, it was so pure. Like I just wanted to go snowboard, right? And sponsors, started to come, and they would maybe give you some money, and that was like, I mean, after the first check, I thought I was pretty much ready to retire off of like $1,000 check. So
I made it. That's it.
I'm like, I'm rich. I could go buy some rims, right? But it's, I miss that in many aspects, right? And that's kind of even like what I'm trying to figure out now, right? Is just that being all in without like kind of an expectation.
Yeah. And there's no sort of like, or I guess back then when you're a teenager, kind of looking into going, okay, where am I going to be like in 10 years time? And it's just properly like living for the moment, isn't it? Sort of.
Yeah. And I think at least for me growing up, it was, I was like, I did one semester of college, and I remember that was right when the Olympics were coming. So I kind of leveraged the Olympics for my mom, like, Mom, I really want to give this a full try. And, so like those sort of conversations, I guess, remind me that like, you are thinking about the future and trying to figure things out. It's just, I guess, like anything, even today, like who knows what the next 5 or 10 years will actually look like, right? With all the different technologies and things coming into the world. So it's like, just anchoring into that core belief.
And how are your parents with it? Like, were they pretty supportive? If they saw that you were, you were enjoying it, you were obviously, doing pretty well, and were they stoked for you?
No, 100%. It's especially now being a parent, right? It's like there's so many aspects of that I appreciate, in especially in my mom, of just believing in me that the time and energy and money and everything could actually like turn into something, right? And just even seeing that now through my lens for my kids, like what weird things are they into that I don't understand, that I think is so lame, that could be like, really magical to them, like just like snowboarding was for me. So it's, I mean, I don't even get it. Like I remember asking my mom after snowboarding and friends, kind of like, getting to an age where you can really appreciate it. Like, Mom, like, how did you, like, what was your mindset raising me? Right. And like, it's kind of like I shared earlier, she's just like, I knew if I could get you to fall in love with something, you could figure it out from there. And it's like such a very simple thing. But it's not, right? It's kind of like, it's like there's a lot of, I think, wisdom in that, at any age, right? If you can fall in love with it, you can usually then figure something out, because you can last long enough to actually like navigate and get good at it. So. And
you were like a pretty kind of straight and narrow kid, like back in the day, right? You weren't like going out partying and.
I wasn't until I was straight edge until I was 21. Back to like the influences on life, right? It's like your inner circle of five, and they were older kids that were into snowboarding, but they were straight edge. So it was hardcore shows and punk rock shows. Yeah. That aspect of it, which I loved. It was cool. It turned a little to the right, but it's I see benefits on both sides, right? It's all how is life unfolding for us? What are we creating? Yeah.
And when you were, it was, you were 16, weren't you, when you went to the first nationals? Was that kind of like just after you got sponsored?
Yeah. So we'd I guess I'd been sponsored for almost a year. It was in Biwabik, Minnesota, right? It was like on one of those like quintessential like 80s like ski films where it's like the trash, like landfill that they converted into like a snowboard hill. And it was also the first time where, I mean, for me, it's the first time where like internationally, like where everyone's coming together, but it was the first pipe dragon that they had ever had. So it was I don't know if it was 8 foot or 10 foot pipe dragon or something, but like, like some farmer came up with a machine to actually cut the half pipe. Because before then it was always shovels or like a backhoe that was cutting it. So all of our minds were just like we could not believe what we'd just seen. It was like a perfect skate ramp, but on snow. Yeah, I mean, it was like, that's so long ago. It was like back when we had like dialers. Like, I don't know if you ever had one of those, like you could hold them up to the payphone and it would like make the sound of quarters dropping in. It was like pre-cell phones, everything.
And how was that experience when you were sort of riding this new pipe? And
I mean, it was life changing in a way of just opening our minds, right? I think when I look back, especially for snowboarding, right? It's like the greatest gift that sport teaches, in my opinion, or action sports, is the ability to like almost to not think something's possible and then to achieve it in a really short period of time, right? Like it's kind of like I remember sitting there with conversations with my friends, like, you know, how big do you think you could go out of the half pipe? Like, you know, for like the rest of our careers, like how big do you think we'll go? And you mean like, oh, like maybe 12 feet out, or, you know, like just or like tricks, you're thinking about the tricks, and now you watch what kids are doing.
Yeah.
And the level of innovation and you know how they're pushing, it's insane. And it's like that aspect from the day you step on snow forever is there, right? Of just like, you know, I don't think I'm gonna ever be able to do this. Like 2 days later, like blinking turns, or it's like, I don't know. That's to me what always kind of drove me to it and got me so passionate about it. Whether it was like competing or whether it was even just doing TV hosting, showing up at X Games, and just seeing people in the zone of just like creating the impossible.
Yeah. And like, was it just developing super quickly? Obviously, you know, it's brand new back then, and it must have kind of been evolving.
Yeah, I think.
Quickly,
I mean,
right?
yeah, I mean, once it kind of clicked for me, probably when I was like maybe I guess 21 or something like that, it just seemed like the sport was just on a rocket, right? It was there was new pipe dragons, there was new size half pipes. Terry was pushing, you know, the like super massive ones up in the Arctic Challenge and stuff. And it was just, I think the sport had finally developed almost more of the infrastructure, and then equipment had actually finally start, you know, get good enough to like hold bands, and then it just started taking off, right? Like, just from backcountry to half pipe to slope style, just people could actually like dedicate real time for training. And just out to Mammoth, and you see airbags sitting at the bottom of the half pipe for like somewhat pedestrians. It kind of shows just like what the future is going to hold, right? It's like, I'm sure you watched X Games. It was madness this year. And then we're going to look back and say how that was kind of like mellow in a few years, right?
Yeah. And it's kind of, it's going to be, it's going to be interesting, but I mean, like, I guess that's it, right? It's just the nature of these sports, and everyone's kind of just pushing each other, and it's just going further and further. Yeah,
because as you get older, you're kind of like you still anchor to like what you thought was cool, right? And you're like, oh, that's kind of lame. It's whack style. And then you kind of look at it, you're like, actually, it's kind of perfect style. And if you're not willing to do it, like sit down, because there's somebody that is, right? And it's like, it's very interesting in that way, you know. And it's because there is the athletic aspect of it. Like, yes, you can build a brand, and yes, you can build a name for yourself, but there's still like the level of performing, right? So like some people, yes, can like live off of a brand they've created because it does have such influence, but it really comes down to like who's pushing it. Like, that's kind of the nature of our sport, whether, at least from my opinion, like whether you agree with it or not, like at least the competitive aspect of it is like, I mean, I'm sure we will see triples in the pipe this year, which is like mind blowing to me. Like I've already like seen footage of people trying it, you know, and it's like, yeah, like that was perfect. Which is mind blowing. Yeah.
And like when you were sort of on the kind of like tour, when you were competing, this was kind of during the 90s and then early 2000s. I mean, you were traveling the whole time pretty much, right? You were sort of always seemed like going from one competition to another. And
yeah, I mean, I have like, you know, 2 million miles on United, you know, 1K, you know, which is 100,000 plus miles for a decade straight. So it was a ton. And it was like, but that's the one part I'd say, like after not leaving the sport, but leaving, is like you forget that you're in like this like cluster of like 20 to like 30 people that just go from event to event, right? Like you're just, and you're all just kind of linked in. It's like a little high school clique in a way. But like those are your family. Like that's who you're like celebrating, you know, the greatest moments with, and also just like crying over the worst, right? It's that aspect is, I think, so special when you're in it. It's sometimes not you can miss it.
And are there any, would you say there's any kind of like like now looking back at it, any sort of standout memorable contests and sort of moments that you have from those times?
Oh,
I mean, there's got to be a bunch.
Millions, right? I had a ton of fun, like with Ross Powers. You know, he was just such a charger, and like he had this playfulness, yet he was still like such a boss, and just, you know, but he was never serious in a way. So like I was more kind of a serious guy, like trying to actually like do something. And he just, I don't know, his level, like how good he was allowed him to just kind of like be loose, but still crush it. You know, with the Friends crew is amazing, always just traveling and filming and just being re-energized by like the youth and just their purity to it. Right. Cause like kind of, I had already done a career and was jaded towards the end. So they would definitely smack me around like, dude, like life is good. And I think, you know, it's nice to be able to have that. Right. Or just travel with Sean. Like even when I was in Mammoth, seeing like JJ and Louis Vito and Sean and just like, you know, like riding up on a lift with him, he's like, I'm still doing this. You know, this is like, it seems like a lifetime ago that I snowboarded, and it was like he was beating me, right? So just like, holy, that aspect of it, in dedication, right? It's just, I don't know. So yeah, I mean, endless, right? And just that, I don't know if there's like tons like just stand up moments. It's just like that you're living in such a bubble of like what you think you create, whether it's from the tricks, whether it's from like events you need to go win. Like you'll hear about, you know, fighters talking about knocking people out in like certain punches. Like you're functioning on that level where, you know, you're visualizing everything, right? It is just second nature. So it's like that aspect now is like, you know, bringing that sort of energy back into life.
And how like sort of serious was it, or that feeling of like, you know, when you first started being sponsored by Burton, and then, you know, sort of like year on year after that, was it just sort of, was it getting way more professional, and you were sort of looking at it as like, you know, this is my career kind of thing, you know, like you're going to work like super hard on kind of winning and, you know, getting coverage and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, I was always very serious about it, right? Like I always like wanted to like grow and become better and learn things. I guess it was, and once you start like tasting it too, right? Like they do that on purpose, right? Like they expose you to stuff. You're like travel. You're like, oh my gosh, this is like a ton of fun. It's you know, putting off like other life aspirations to go snowboarding, and then I think it just kind of it morphs to where like everything's kind of morphing at the same time, right? So like there's a time period where I thought I was being pro, and then, you know, I went to a trainer and he looks at me and he's like, dude, you're a fat slob. He's like what do you like? You literally make money in sports. And then like, cause you don't know what you don't know. Right. So I think all aspects of like from training to then eating to like, I remember having like a mental coach and just like even traveling and like how to regulate time zones. And I mean, people are investing lots of money into you. And I think it's good sometimes to like not register maybe all that's happening, because it is a lot of pressure and a lot of things, but also, yeah, I mean, take it in, right? Like seize the moment.
Yeah. And when did the hosting start? Was that kind of down to like incentives, and was that something that the sponsors were like, okay, you know, like if you're doing more appearances, then you're going to get more money out of it? Or like, what was the deal there?
Yeah, I guess like when I look back, a lot of it was you're just trying to snowboard. You're trying to like make money to keep snowboarding. You're trying to like, you know, grow your name. So I feel like I'd get hurt every season. And then, you know, while I was at an event or something, if I got hurt, then, you know, could grab the mic for, you know, a small network. And then when Fuel TV came out, you know, it was this like amazing platform of like, okay, it's dedicated towards that. They're covering every, you know, different tours. They're doing different shows and events. And it wasn't like this passion, like I want to go do it. But then once I started to do it, I was like, it's a lot of fun. Right. Yeah. But like anything, you have to refine your skills. And I remember taking like hosting classes and like driving up to LA every week to try and like read lines, learn how to do it, and struggle. And it was horrible because my nerves are like, I'm more of an introvert, and my nerves would just get the best of me. So it was always like this train wreck. You know, I'd go up there, struggle, and then drive home for another 2.5 hours. But yeah, it was my contracts were set up, you know, to offset pay. Was like, if you get this many covers, if you get this many contest wins, or if you get on TV, right, there's like different incentive packages. And me being an opportunist, like, you know, TV was worked into there. But I think it was worked in when TV was like harder to get on. So then as like you have a multi-year deal, and then Fuel launches. It's like, okay, cool. We have a network here that qualifies. So it was this perfect alignment of like, I could dive into something I really enjoyed doing. I loved communicating the story of action sports, telling people stories, but then also there was a pay structure behind it that was kind of like built in. So that was, I think like a lot of things, right? There's a lot of opportunities and things that are like in our peripheral. And it's like, you actually just take the moment to like grab it, believe in it, and then kind of other things will like package around it.
And what are you doing? So you were doing events like X Games, and sort of you were like doing all the commentary there, and then doing a show for Fuel TV. Is that right?
Yeah. So Fuel had like that TV show 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 that Brent Rockenbeck would host, and so then they were like dipping into different events, whether it was like the Do Tour or like whatever series, and summer events in Mount Hood. And then Sobe was a sponsor of mine, and they did stuff with Fuel TV. So there's always like cross-pollination of that. That kind of like led to it. And then, X Games was, I remember competing at X Games and then being able to go from athlete to sideline reporter, and just like, you're sitting there. I mean, you do TV, you're like sitting there memorizing your like one line for when they come to you live to like not completely, panic and forget it. But those are like the moments, right? Like the moments of stress, the moments that you're, if not up against a wall, creating a wall that feels like it, just to like, push off of it.
Yeah. Did you enjoy it? Did you kind of think that, sort of?
Yeah, I loved it. And then like towards the end, with trying to run Friends and just, investor relations and raising money and just kind of like what that vehicle was creating. I remember showing up to the last X Games that I host, and the sport had just, had jumped again. I mean, it jumps every year, but it jumped. And I was just sitting in the booth, like calling tricks wrong, feeling like a complete loser. And then, like, that part it was a good wake up, right? Like if you're going to function at a high level, you have to be committed. You have to be all in. And so after that, it was like, okay, I need to like sit down and let people that are actually like living the sport daily, come do it. Right. And it's, it was a bummer because it's super fun, but I think like in snowboarding, like if you're not going to be at that level, like take a seat.
Yeah. And in 2010, that was sort of when the idea of Friends began, right? That was sort of when you kind of got together with a group of friends, and then thought, okay, well, what are we gonna do? Try and do something within snowboarding. And
it was, I forget what year it was, like maybe 2009 or 8 or something. Like we had started a while. It was like Danny Davis and I, we both missed X Games finals. We're sitting in the Little Nell in Aspen, just like pissed. And then like I'd always wanted to do a company, and like came up with the name and everything. And it was just a sticker company, right? That's all it was like, we just want to celebrate, what we believe snowboarding is all about, and just, have like a crew, like just kind of like when we were growing up, right? Like whether it was SHC, like, or whatever, just a collective of people, right? And then it evolved and took on a life of its own. And, there's a lot of epic moments. And then there's also a lot of like tragic times as well. But it was cool just to see the energy that can be created when like-minded people come together, right? And just bring different elements and just bring different perspectives. And it was just like kind of like snowboarding, but a mini cluster of it, right? Like trying to create something that doesn't exist, burst something special into the universe.
And when you sort of went from stickers, was that when you were you guys sort of speaking to each other and going, okay, well, you were like looking at headphones and sort of thinking about it then? Like, what was the idea around that?
We tossed ideas around forever, only because like, you have 7 of us there. We all have different sponsors, right? So it's like, we're trying to create something that's authentic to us, but also doesn't conflict with something that like, someone's like, dude, I'm like I'm eating off of this sponsor category. I can't just give it up because we want to like, so it was a balance of many things. And then, my friend Eric Koch, who I'd known forever, he was team manager at Burton. He was open with time, and we kind of all came together, and he had the idea of doing headphones, and it just made sense. We're like, oh, like we love music. I ride with headphones. It's a category that's taking off, right? It was just like, again, like kind of a perfect alignment of things.
Okay. And how did you guys start it? Were you all putting in money individually, or like did you try and get funding and
No,
try
so
and
we
get
did.
some backing?
Like I said, Eric had come on board to kind of like head up the initial creation of it, or like the structure of it, and then we had Dennis Jensen, who is the president of Burton Snowboards. He came on as our chairman of our board. So like we had a lot of like good industry vets per se to like help guide it. But yeah, we all threw in seed capital, and then did a business plan and deck and financials, and spent the next 8 months kind of like road mapping everything out. Raised around, closed, launched into all Zoomies, a bunch of other doors. That was going. Then that was like when Sony had a company, Peak. I think it was called Peak. Skull Candy was still crushing it. Monster was in there. Soul Republic. Like there was just a lot of companies coming in, and I was like, yes, we have something here, but it's like we're undercapitalized. We're not that differentiated. We need to come up with something that's like we need to innovate in this space. Yeah. And that could be like maybe the best decision that happened, or maybe the worst decision that happened. Who knows? But it was, like deciding to go into women's opened up like, endless opportunities, like from, where we ended up getting distributed by, the amount of press we got. Like it was just the expression of telling a different story. All that kind of then transfolded out of that. But it was also then shifting away from the original idea of it being, us kind of creating this thing that represented snowboarding, right? So in hindsight, is that good or is it bad? It's too late for that.
And how are the feelings between everyone, like between the team?
I got to ride with Danny in squad, which is cool. I hadn't seen him for a long time. It's been now a pretty long time, right? Like I think there's a lot of moments, at least for me, there's a lot of moments that were horrible, right? In hindsight, it's just like, holy cow, ego is crazy. You can get caught up with it and think you're right, or even just think you're right, so it doesn't really matter, right? It's kind of like forgetting the core aspects of friendship, or like why you got into certain things. And then you had money, you had stress, you had pressure, you had all sorts of things. It can get crazy.
Yeah. You were sort of like one of the more like senior guys, right? So wasn't there like a sort of like a decade gap between sort of like some of the younger athletes?
Yeah. So when we first started hanging out, I was pretty much towards the end of my career, right, at Burton, but still on the A team and everything. And then like the new crop of kids were coming in, so it's kind of like, as I said, like that pure, like I was able to like drive them around, like kind of mentor them, and they were able to kind of like infuse me with the energy of like, snowboarding is fun and stuff. So it was like this cool, cool kind of juxtaposition between it. But yeah, I had a decade on them.
And when you sort of saw that it was kind of like not going the right direction, or what you guys thought it would do, what happened then?
Well, I'm sure. I guess
it was getting a bit messy, right? And it's kind of like,
yeah. And I don't even know if it was messy, because at that time it was, I was the CEO of it. I was running it full time. They were still snowboarding and everything. There was millions of dollars invested into it, so it was more of like, and this is kind of where, like in hindsight, it was probably a little harsh, but it's like, hey, we're pivoting to women's, right? And if you if you don't want to be a part of it, we can buy you out, or if you do, let's do this, right? But it's in my mind, it was probably such an easy decision, because I'm looking at like, okay, if we go this route, we can raise more money, we can get into Apple, Best Buy, all these things, be differentiated, and I probably like marginalized, what it really was, right? Like, and just kind of was like, okay, cool, let's just drive the car over here. They're probably just like, what do you mean? Like, what are we doing? Yeah. So, and I think that in the beginning they were on board with it as best they could, right? Like they got to see that we could raise more money. They got to see all the press we were getting, like Rihanna sitting there wearing your headphones and things. Like, it's not a bad look. So I think there was that aspect of excitement, but in the end, when everything kind of train wrecked, it was then, okay, so like I just traveled for like a decade with these kids that were like family, but then now we're not, right? And it's like, so kind of like what you said is, it's cool to hang out with Danny and to share some laughs, but it's like, dude, like he's an amazing human, right? And like same with all of them. So it's like to have some friendships lost over it. I definitely see why people say like mixing business and pleasure, right? Or like business and friendship. But then it's like, I want to work with people that like, I want to be so into whatever I do that they are my friends, right? So it's just, it's
all in.
Yeah, it's all in, right? But it's
Yeah.
just being more awake, right? I think like anything, life, I think the most value we learn in life are from the pain moments. And there was definitely a lot of pain moments during that time.
Yeah. And what do you reckon are some of the sort of like the main lessons, like learning from, I guess like running your first company and kind of
Well, I think
that journey?
For me at least, it was, I felt like it was like I could force anything to work. I mean, I was like, again, like the gift of snowboarding is kind of like, this isn't possible, and then you make it possible. Like that starts to like build like a level of confidence of like, no, we'll do it. Like, you need this, cool, like we make it happen. Oh, we need to raise money, we made it happen, right? So like, I think that mixed with then not being in check, whether with ego or certain things, is a really bad recipe, right? Like just the lacking like the human aspect of it, of being like, okay, so like, okay, we're friends, or okay, like what is this about? And just that vision of what it could become, it being like the drug, and then just kind of pushing and pushing and pushing and being like, if I could do anything again, I probably would have just stopped, a few years earlier. Just been like, okay, life's long, friendships are important, more important than any of this. Like, yeah, there's money in this, but like, let's like it's not worth losing all of that over like some money. Right. Yeah. So I think that's kind of the biggest lesson, is it's like, family and friends, are everything, and it's kind of obvious, but sometimes people don't act that way. So it's not always obvious. I know I didn't, right?
I think you kind of you get lost in what you're doing, right? So if you're sort of so invested in something, like especially when it's your own business, and you kind of, if you set it up, whether you've gone solo, whether you've gone with people, it's sort of, I think that's kind of, it's tricky to sometimes look outside of it and the detail. And even when friends and family can tell you things, and you just kind of, you just may not want to hear it or whatever it is. It's a strange time, I think.
No, 100%. Especially like if you hear people like, oh, that's not possible, but then you make it possible, right? So it's like this, like, at least for me, like, I don't think people could really tell me anything at that point, right? It was kind of like, I like had a vision, and it was like, working, and then it's hard to have, to have someone like speak into at that point. Yeah.
When it did start falling apart, I mean, what did you do afterwards? What happened?
I mean, it was a train wreck. Like it took like a year and a half to like kind of wrap things up. I got sued by like 3 different entities. I kind of had to sell my house, like everything. It was a nightmare. So I think that was then blowing up a company, losing kind of all your best friends because you pushed them all away or pissed them off and things like that. And then combining that with like really a transition, right? Like from snowboarding to TV wasn't really a transition. It was like, oh yeah, cool. Naturally, like kind of led into it. And then from TV even to Friends was kind of a natural roll into it. Yeah. So it was the first time in my life where things weren't rolling, right? So it's kind of then like, okay. And then because things had rolled for so long, it's almost like the tools and the life skills, you almost like, you don't use them. So then they become like non-existent in a way. So it was like for me, it was a horrible couple of years of just dealing with the emotional trauma, dealing with the financial aspect of it, and then kind of rebuilding like, okay, who am I? Like finding self, getting back into life. I mean, I'm sure like a lot of people even just going through the pandemic, right? It's just rocking your world in a way that you're like, okay, I have to like really reboot.
Yeah. And then almost sort of go inside, right? Like go inside yourself and sort of think.
Yeah, but you're going inside yourself, but at that point, it's like the last thing I want to do is go inside myself. I just blew everything up. We're like, all I want to do is like eject from Earth, right? So it's like this aspect of, yeah, I know the right thing to do is this, but like that's counterintuitive to everything that I want to do in life, right? Of just like, yeah. So it was, in hindsight, yes, I probably took 3 years to what I could have done in a couple months if I had been like completely grounded and like, in touch. And I think that's the scary part of it. When you're pushing so hard, you can like literally like separate yourself. And if things are going, you can pull it off. But if it breaks, then you're out in space. At least I was.
And like after taking some time off, then you went into the CBD business, right? So you kind of shifted and.
Yeah, so I part of it was moving to Texas, getting completely sober, getting off like even doctor prescribed medications, which were like really jacked up with my brain. I was on Klonopin, which is the benzo, and it took 6 months for my brain to start working again. Wow. So that was kind of like the going inside was really just getting completely sober and like doing all the hard work. And then while I was there, I'd come across a CBD company just to regulate my anxiety and just all aspects of kind of what I would normally take, medicine or self-medicate for. Like, can I do this in a way that doesn't, implode my life? Yeah. And CBD was a massive gift there. And then I came back home, and there was a friend they had a farm up in San Jacinto, and they were growing hemp, and just kind of like learning all about like cannabis and the industry, and just seeing like what it was doing for people's lives. Like one of the founders, his sister had 6 surgeries for like open wounds from sitting in a wheelchair, and just like by putting like cream on, like hasn't had one in I think like 2 years now. Just like the miracle of cannabis, and just like the way that it's touching people's lives. Like I said, I didn't grow up smoking weed, and I rarely use cannabis from like a smoking perspective because I get so paranoid. But to see like the other side of it, and so it's been cool.
Nice. And then like now, I mean, you've like, are you getting back into snowboarding? And you kind of.
Yes, I well, I mean, I don't know, like getting back into it in the sense of just finding that joy, right? Yeah. It was being in Mammoth, and then especially riding with my kids and just seeing that, like paying it forward and like equipping them with this amazing gift of what snowboarding can do. Going to Mount Hood this summer, and go hang out with Russell Winfield and like the K2 guys, and I was talking to JJ this morning, and just it's like being a kid again. So I definitely.
It must be cool seeing your kids get into it as well. Are they like?
Yeah, I mean, it's like my son's pretty shy. He kind of like, it reminds me of my younger brother, like just super smart, but like a little bit shy. So to see him like just in those first couple of days of snowboarding, like not being able to do it, not confident, but then like getting a little bit of like swagger and kind of feeling it, right? It's that gift of growth.
Yeah.
So it was pretty magical.
Nice, man.
Yeah.
And what else do you have coming up? Have you got any other projects you're sort of working on later this year?
Yeah. So after the CBD company, worked with a cannabis startup out of Palm Springs, which was awesome. They had an indoor grow, and edible space. So kind of like brand strategy, creation, product design, all that sort of stuff. And then they just sold to now starting like a luxury lifestyle cannabis agency. So like
nice.
Similar thing I've done with like from Burton to Friends to them, of just let's innovate, let's carve out your look at the industry, right? Like how can we be different, add value to people. So it's
and
cool.
with Burton, I mean, you were kind of involved with product, and I guess all the team was, like all the athletes are kind of.
Yeah, I mean that was one of the greatest gifts of at least Jake Burton and Burton, right? Was like they were a rider driven company. So like myself, Trevor, Andrew, DCP, Ramon, Trev, Terry, like just the crew of us that would just meet 4 times a year and just go through every single product and all the ads and like, hey, this is cool or this isn't cool. And you're sitting there with Jake, and Jake's like, it's like, well, what do you think? And you're kind of like, I don't know, what do you think? Like, like it's just that trust, right? The like, okay, like help guide this, right? Like, what do you guys think is cool? He was always really good at that of like, it's not about what I think is cool. It's about what you think is cool. So whether that was Burton or Nike or Pepsi, all the companies actually were just really lean on their athletes to help guide. So in hindsight, that was a massive opportunity to work with some like really, really talented people.
Yeah. Nice, man. Yeah. And what was your relationship like with Jake?
I mean, at least for me, almost like a father figure in a way. I mean, I had a key to his house on Long Island. I could go there and drive his car, or hang out, or do anything. I mean, it was very, very tight, right? And I think that aspect of it tight was also, the ability to, contract negotiations or, just certain things that would show up that could also create like real tension, right? It was but he cared, right? Like it's his opening our minds up to like possibility, or like, we'd go, see the Celtics and, on court and fly there in his jet and stuff. And it was just like, I looked at it as him being like, dude, all this is possible. Like you could do any of this. Like, you just have to believe, you got to put in the work, you got to learn. But like, so like that aspect of being able to influence product, or to like really see what your life could become. I mean, coming from Pennsylvania, I remember taking French classes. Like, why am I ever going to learn French? Like, I'm not going to travel, right? Like pre-snowboarding. Yeah. So for Jake to kind of, I think, know that gift and to share it with myself and just, a lot of other athletes, he deserves all the love he gets. That's for sure.
Nice one. And what's the best way, like, if people want to follow what you're up to, so if they want to get in touch?
Yeah, so it's I mean, I was vacant on Instagram forever, but at Keir Dillon on Instagram, definitely going to start leading into that more often. Yep. And then on the agency side, it's just DillionAgency.co. But yeah, I'm always around, or hopefully on the slopes.
Nice, man. Keir, it's been awesome chatting to you and hearing everything from all the early days and the stories and with comps, and thanks for opening up as well for about with sort of hard times, ups and downs of the business, and it's going to be good to see what happens with the agency, and we'll definitely be keeping a lookout.
Right on. I really appreciate it. Life is that's what's good about snowboarding. It represents life. You're gonna land some, you're gonna miss some, you probably get hurt, but it's all good. Thanks so much, man.
Awesome. Thanks, Nate.
Later.